This is video 14 in the MBTI series, and today we are talking about ESFJ, also known as the console. Before I get into anything, I want to say something that I think is important every time we talk about personality types. These types are not a strict set of rules that define who you are or who you have to be. They are a guide, a way of understanding yourself and the people around you a little better. And they are definitely not a measure of whether someone is a good or bad person. People are shaped by their upbringing, their mental health, their experiences, and so many other things. The type is just one piece of the picture, and a rough one at that. Now, let me tell you something personal before I start, because I think it sets up this video nicely. I actually have a student who I believe is an ESFJ, and she is one of the students I have genuinely connected with over time. She opens up to me. She shares things that are going on in her life, her dreams, her frustrations, and it feels less like a student-teacher relationship and more like two people who actually enjoy talking to each other. She has started to feel like a friend, and that is not something I say lightly because I am quite selective about who I let get close. She once told me that the personality type she finds hardest to deal with is INTP, and the person in her life who is an INTP is her own brother. She was quick to clarify that she does not hate her brother as a person, but the type, the way he processes things, the way he communicates, it is something she genuinely struggles with. And when you look at the letters, that makes sense. ESFJ and INTP share no letters at all. They are essentially opposites in every preference. That kind of total mismatch in how two people think, communicate, and make sense of the world can create real friction even between people who care about each other. I share the F and the J with ESFJs, and I think that is part of what makes the connection with this student feel relatively natural. We both feel deeply, and we both prefer some sense of order and direction in our lives. But the rest of the letters are quite different, and those differences show up in real ways that I will talk about as we go. Now let me break down what ESFJ actually means. The E is for extroversion. The S is for sensing. The F is for feeling. And the J is for judging. So this is an extroverted, sensing, feeling, judging type. The name console fits well because the original meaning of a console is someone who represents others, someone who serves as a bridge between people, and someone who is trusted to maintain relationships and keep things functioning smoothly. That is exactly what ESFJs tend to do in the groups and communities they belong to. Let me get into the main traits. The first thing most people notice about ESFJs is how warm and socially engaged they are. They are genuinely interested in the people around them. They notice when someone is having a hard time. They remember important details about your life. They follow up on things you mentioned in passing weeks ago. That kind of attentiveness makes people feel seen and valued in a way that is genuinely rare. The second trait is their strong sense of responsibility. ESFJs take their duties seriously. Whether it is a role in the workplace, a position in the family, or a commitment in a friendship, they show up and they deliver. They do not cut corners, and they do not take their responsibilities lightly. This makes them deeply dependable people. The third trait is their need for harmony. This type genuinely dislikes conflict and tension in their relationships and environments. They work hard to keep things smooth, to make sure everyone gets along, to resolve misunderstandings before they become problems. This is both a strength and a vulnerability, which I will explain more in a moment. The fourth trait is their deep connection to community and tradition. ESFJs find a lot of meaning in belonging to something larger than themselves. Whether that is family, a cultural group, a religious community, or a close circle of friends, they invest heavily in those connections, and they work to maintain them over time. They are also often drawn to established ways of doing things, rituals, traditions, and social norms that give structure and meaning to their lives. What are their real strengths? Their ability to make people feel genuinely welcome and cared for is probably the most significant one. When an ESFJ is hosting an event, managing a team, or simply being a friend, the people around them feel noticed and valued. That quality builds trust and loyalty in a way that more detached types often struggle to achieve. Their organizational skills in social and practical contexts are also a real strength. They are good at managing the logistics of relationships, making sure events run smoothly, keeping track of what people need, and coordinating things in a way that actually works. They are the person who makes sure everything happens and everyone is taken care of. Their commitment to the people they love is deep and consistent. When an ESFJ is in your corner, you feel it. They show up, they follow through, and they do not abandon relationships when things get hard. That kind of loyalty matters. And their practical care for others, the way they notice concrete needs and respond to them, is something that many more abstract types simply cannot replicate. They do not just think about how to help. They actually help in specific, tangible ways. Now the weaknesses, because being honest about both sides is important. One of the biggest challenges for ESFJs is their sensitivity to criticism and disapproval. Their identity is closely tied to being seen as capable, caring, and responsible. When that image is challenged, even through well-intentioned feedback, it can hit them harder than they show. They may not say they are hurt, but they feel it, and it can affect their confidence in ways that linger. Their need for approval from others is also something worth naming honestly. ESFJs care a lot about what people think of them, not in a shallow, vain way, but in a deeply people-connected way. They want to be liked, accepted, and seen as good. When they feel rejected or judged, it genuinely affects them. This can sometimes lead them to make decisions based on what others expect rather than what they actually want. Their avoidance of conflict is another real weakness. Because they value harmony so strongly, they sometimes let real issues go unaddressed in the name of keeping the peace. Problems that should be talked about get smoothed over. Feelings that should be expressed get swallowed. And over time, those unaddressed things can build into something much harder to manage. They can also be quite traditional in a way that limits openness to new ideas or approaches. If something challenges the way things have always been done, their first response is often resistance rather than curiosity. This can create friction in environments that are changing or evolving quickly. How do they handle conflict? Not comfortably. Their instinct is to smooth things over, to apologize even when they are not at fault, to do whatever it takes to restore the sense of harmony. In the short term, this keeps things calm. In the long term, it means that real issues often get buried rather than resolved. When conflict is unavoidable and involves them personally, they can become emotional in a way that makes it hard for the other person to respond logically. They feel it deeply, and they express that feeling, which can sometimes escalate a situation rather than de-escalate it. The most effective approach when dealing with an ESFJ in conflict is to be gentle, specific, and focused on the relationship. Attacking their character or delivering feedback harshly will shut them down completely. But coming to them with care and a genuine desire to resolve things usually gets a much better response. How do they handle stress? When an ESFJ is under significant stress, they tend to focus even more on others as a way of managing their own discomfort. They pour themselves into helping, organizing, and taking care of people around them, partly because it is their natural mode and partly because it distracts them from their own internal difficulty. If the stress becomes too much, they can become more emotional, more sensitive to perceived criticism, and more controlling in their immediate environment. The drive to keep everything in order becomes more intense when they are feeling out of control internally. They recover best when they feel valued and appreciated, when they have some social connection with people they trust, and when there is enough structure in their environment to give them a sense of stability. How do they behave in relationships? In close relationships, ESFJs are devoted and attentive. They put a lot of thought into the people they care about. They celebrate birthdays, they check in, they make sure you feel remembered and important. That level of consistent attentiveness is genuinely one of the most beautiful things about this type. The challenge is that they sometimes give so much that they expect the same level of attentiveness in return, and when they do not get it, they feel hurt in a way they may not express directly. The unspoken expectation that the relationship should feel equally invested can create tension that never gets addressed because neither person named it. They also need to feel needed. Being valued, being counted on, being the person someone turns to, these things matter deeply to an ESFJ. When they feel overlooked or taken for granted, it affects them on a level that goes beyond just feeling unappreciated. How do they socialize and make friends? Very naturally and often in abundance. ESFJs are warm, engaging, and genuinely interested in the people they meet. They are the type who introduces themselves at events, who makes new people feel included, and who follows up after a first conversation to keep things going. Their social world tends to be wide because they genuinely enjoy people and they put energy into maintaining connections. But the depth of those connections varies. They have a large circle but a smaller inner circle where the really meaningful relationships live. What careers suit them? ESFJs tend to do well in roles that allow them to care for others in a concrete and organized way. Teaching, nursing, social work, healthcare administration, human resources, event planning, customer service, and community management are all common fits. They need work that feels meaningful in a human way, and they need an environment that appreciates their contribution rather than taking it for granted. They struggle in highly competitive, individualistic, or impersonal environments. A setting where the focus is purely on metrics and there is no room for human connection leaves them feeling disconnected and unmotivated. What types get along well with ESFJs? Types that appreciate warmth, reliability, and a genuine investment in the relationship tend to connect well. ISFJs often make natural companions because they share a similar care-focused orientation toward life. INFJs, which is my type, can also connect well because the shared F and J create real common ground in terms of values and the preference for meaningful, structured relationships. As I mentioned at the start, ESFJs and INTPs often find each other the most difficult to deal with. They share no letters and approach life from almost completely opposite angles. The ESFJ is warm, socially oriented, and tradition-following. The INTP is independent, intellectually driven, and constantly questioning established norms. Those differences can create real friction that is hard to bridge without real effort from both sides. Types that are very independent, emotionally detached, or resistant to social norms can also find ESFJs a bit much. The social expectations and the emotional investment that come naturally to this type can feel like pressure to types that need more personal space and less relational maintenance. Now, from my perspective as an INFJ, the F and J we share create some genuine common ground. We both care deeply about people. We both take our commitments seriously. We both prefer to have some sense of direction and closure rather than living in constant open-endedness. And when I think about my student who connects with me so naturally, I think a lot of that comes from the shared feeling orientation. We are both reading the emotional layer of a conversation and responding to it, even when nobody has said anything explicitly. What I appreciate about ESFJs is their warmth and their consistency. They are not just warm in the first conversation and then cold afterward. They maintain that attentiveness over time. That kind of sustained care is something I genuinely notice and value. What I sometimes find harder is the need for social validation. As an INFJ, I do not particularly care about what the wider social group thinks of me. I care about a few important people, and that is enough. An ESFJ who is very focused on how they are perceived by the group and who makes decisions based on social approval can feel, to me, like they are not fully operating from their own internal compass. That is not a judgment. It is just a real difference in how we are wired. I also find the conflict avoidance difficult sometimes. As someone who values honesty and genuine resolution, being around someone who smooths things over without addressing them can feel like we are just postponing a problem rather than solving it. How can ESFJs grow? Learning to identify and express their own needs directly, rather than hoping others will notice or waiting until the resentment builds, is probably the most important area. They are very good at reading other people's needs. Applying that same attentiveness to themselves is genuine, important growth. Getting more comfortable with conflict, specifically the kind that involves them personally and that needs to be addressed rather than avoided, is also worth working on. Real peace is not the same as the absence of conflict. Real peace comes from actually working through the things that matter. And building some independence from external approval, learning to trust their own judgment without needing the group to validate it, opens up a much more authentic version of who they are. ESFJs are some of the most genuinely caring and socially connected people you will encounter. They hold communities together, they make people feel valued, and they bring a kind of warm reliability that most people appreciate deeply once they have experienced it. The work is making sure that same care comes back to them from others and from themselves.
Before we close, I want to ask you something.
If you are an ESFJ, what is the thing people most often misunderstand about you? Or, if you have an ESFJ in your life, what has your experience with them actually been like? Leave it in the comments. I genuinely want to know. Thanks for watching. If this video resonated with you, please consider hitting the subscribe button. I want to be upfront and share that I use this text-to-speech voice to tell my stories because as a full-time ESL teacher, I have to be very careful with my vocal cords. Managing vocal nodules means I have to save my voice for my students, but I did not want that to stop me from sharing these unfiltered thoughts with you. I am Jhonna, and I am currently working toward my goal of 1,000 subscribers so I can finally monetize this channel and turn this passion into a sustainable part of my future. This is my diary of solo living here in the Philippines, and your support, whether through a comment or a sub, helps me keep this channel growing. If you would like to help out even more, you can check out the buy a treat for my pets link in the description. My dogs definitely appreciate the love. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss the next update. Thank you for being such an important part of this journey. I am Jhonna, and I will see you in the next one.